Since today is Lag Baomer, one of the most popular days for weddings, we'll discuss the Birchas Eresin, we'll discuss the brachas one make at the wedding. As we know, there's a mitzvah of Kiddushin in the Torah. Ki yikach ish isha. There's a biblical mitzvah of Kiddushin, or we'll see if there is. According to different Rishonim, we'll discuss what exactly is the mitzvah. Is the mitzvah marriage per se, or it's just a means to an end? But we'll get to that. Maybe not today. So there's a discussion between the Rambam and Rov Rishonim. The Rambam holds Kiddushin is a mitzvah saseh, and he looks that we make two brachas we make by the Kiddushin. Boer Pri Agafen, then we make a bracha Asher Kedushin Mitzvah V'tzivanu Al Arayas. He commands us on to keep the forbidden relations. V'asa lanu es arusos, and you can't live as an arus as someone who's just engaged Kiddushin but not Nesuin. V'hitia lanu es ha-nesuas lanu al-yedei chuppah v'Kiddushin. We go through chuppah Kiddushin. Barachat Hashem makadish amo Yisrael yedei chuppah v'Kiddushin. Those are the two blessings one makes. So the Rambam is very consistent. The Rambam's opinion is these are classical Birchas HaMitzvah. We know before I shake a lulav, before I sit in the sukkah, before I put on the tefillin, the usual principle is you make brachas over lasiyason. You make the bracha first, and then you perform the mitzvah. So the Rambam writes, the same way it works by all other mitzvahs, the same way it works by Kiddushin. Your rabbi, whoever is making the brachas first, and then the next stage after that is we do the Hareya Mikudeshus Libetabazu, because that's Moshe, which is the actual Kiddushin, when the husband, the chassan, gives the ring to the kala and makes the announcement to you. So the Rambam writes, this is a classical Birchas HaMitzvah, brachas first, mitzvah later. Jeff?
No, but you spoke about the brachas we make over Erusin. I might have thought bracha over Kiddushin.
Well, no, Eresin is Kiddushin. Eresin and Kiddushin are the same. The Nisuin is different.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, even though we mentioned both in there, right? But but that's the Rambam. So the Rambam says you first make the bracha, and then you do it afterwards. There's a famous Rush in Meseches Ksuvos who argues with the Rambam and says that this is not a classical Birchas HaMitzvah. In fact, maybe there is no mitzvah of Kiddushin, per se. In other words, the mitzvah could be pru ravu. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of having children. So the appropriate way of having children is for to first get married and then have children. So therefore, perhaps there is no mitzvah per se. Hence the Rush writes, whether he says it's a mitzvah or not, he claims the brachas we make are not a Birchas HaMitzvah. If you hold it's not a mitzvah, it can't be a Birchas HaMitzvah. It's a Birchas Shevach V'Hodah. It's a bracha of praise and thanksgiving. And he says if you look at the language, if it was a classical Birchas HaMitzvah, what would I have thought the mitzvah should be? L'kadesh es ha'isha, al mitzvahs Kiddushin. What's this? Also, letters arusos, hita letters nesuos. It goes to a very strange language, not the classical language nusach habracha. So, based on this and other factors, the Rush and others conclude that this is not a Birchas HaMitzvah; it's a Birchas Shavach V'Hodah. So, we see from the Rush that if he says Kiddushin, the brachas you make at the Kiddushin are a Birchas Shavach V'Hodah, there must be a fundamental dispute going on between the Rambam and the Rush, whether Kiddushin itself is a mitzvah. The Rambam holds Kiddushin itself. There's a mitzvah of Kiddushin, and there's a mitzvah of Puravu, two independent mitzvahs. Hence, Kiddushin requires its own Birchas HaMitzvah. And the Rush seems to be saying there is no mitzvah per se of Kiddushin. If you're going to have kids, this is the way you have to go about doing it. And the brachas are only a Birchas Shevach V'Hodah. It's a bracha on the institution of marriage, not an institution making fun of marriage, but on the institution of marriage, the concept, like for instance, the famous Chasam Sofer in Parashas Emor, that where the Torah talks about the Kedushas Kahuna, about the Kohanim, So the Chassan Sofer asks, what happens if someone comes into shul, no one knows who he is, and he says he's a Kohen, because he always wanted that Kohen Aliyah. And he gets up, he gets the Kohen, let's say he's doing it a couple of days, weeks, maybe even years. And then either he feels guilty and admits, or someone comes to him out of town and says, I know this guy, he's not a Kohen. And whatever, and they find out he's not a Kohen. So the Chasam Sofer said, obviously you're not going to give him Kohen anymore, but it wasn't a problem up until now, because basically it's the institution of Kahuna. He said he was a Kohen, so I was giving kavod to the institution of Kahuna. Like I tell Kohanim at my Shabbos table, I'm not giving kavod to you when I'm asking you to bench, I'm giving kavod to the institution of the Kahuna. So same thing here, a Birka Shevach Valda isn't on necessarily the Chassan and Kala per se, but it's on the concept of marriage and the institution of marriage, and therefore the Rush holds it's on a Birka Shevach Valda. So major naftamina between the Rambam and the Rush is, when do you make these brachas? According to the Rambam, you have to make the brachas before the Kiddushin, because like all Birkas HaMitzvah, barring a couple of exceptions, you make the bracha first, and then you do the bracha afterwards. The Rush would hold you can make the bracha after the Kiddushin. In fact, maybe it's better. I'm making the bracha after you get married. I'm making on the institution of marriage. It's a Birkas Shevach Valda. The classical exception to the rule is obviously the case of a ger, a convert, that obviously, or not obviously, you make the bracha after they come out of the mikveh, at least after they tovel in the mikveh, because they can't make the blessing first, because they're not Jewish yet. So they have to become Jewish first, and then they make the bracha. That's the classical exception to the rule. That's assuming, again, but that's assuming it's a Birkas HaMitzvah, which is a different question. Is it a mitzvah to go ahead and convert someone, or is it just if they want to convert, that's the way you do. Right? Jeff is alluding to Netilas Yadayim. That's another exception to the rule. That's because they don't want us to make brachas with dirty hands, so therefore they make the and also by a regular woman going to the mikveh or any time, the minhag is you do it afterwards, because you want to, since by a ger, you do. That's why the custom is anyway. Women have a minhag. They tova in the mikveh first, and they go back out and make the bracha. Even though, strictly speaking, once you go into the mikveh, that's it.
Could they not do it in the water in the mikveh? Because I know if they like to.
Yeah, they do.
They do while they're inside the mikveh. Right?
Yeah, that's when they make the bracha. Well, when they're inside.
Because by
once they do, because usually whether it's different minhagim, whether you do 3 times, but obviously they dunk first once, so it's already a done deal, and then afterwards they go and then they make the bracha and they go back in again.
But with kalim, it's the other way around, right?
Yeah, kalim, I think, even though it's out, out usually I think the practice is you make the bracha,
and then you
even though that's a discussion, because that's not the same, I guess, as a tefillah of a person. Yeah, but even though you're using the lashon al, that's why it usually should have been litzvo kalim, because al is usually, because one of the principles the Rambam gives us is if you're doing it over lasiyasa and you use the la, the prefix la, if you do it afterwards you use al. So that's one of the reasons why it could be al tefillah is al, even though we're doing it before, is because once they set up the nusach by tefillah, whether it's tefillah's ger, tefillah's nida, so they left the lashon al. But or maybe some do it, some put it in and then do it. Yeah.
Look, we're talking about the Ran now, who says that there's not a mitzvah per se of Kiddushin, right?
Yeah, Ran, Rash, okay, yeah.
Okay. Now, but would the Ran agree that there's a negative mitzvah shlosa say that if it's a sin, it's an avera to have children to be pruruvu without first doing Kiddushin?
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, either you wouldn't, according to the Rambam. In addition to everything else, you could be mavatal mitzvahs asay of kedushin, but according to other mefarshim, they come up with different reasons why it's prohibited, whether it's an issur of zona or other things. Meaning, everyone agrees that it's not the appropriate way. There are is another discussion about pelegish, which we really don't have today. There are other ways of having kids without a wife and stuff, but in terms of But generally speaking,
Yes,
Yeah.
speaking, go
which
on.
we,
Which we're allowed to do now,
Generally
right?
speaking,
We're allowed to.
Go on.
The ban is over, isn't it?
yeah, strictly
Generally
speaking, obviously the practice is not. So, again, if a person's going to do it that way, probably a pelagish would be the best way. But we don't, generally speaking, we don't have pelagish.
Okay, but a person,
No, not
a
strictly-
person can be
based on
married
our law,
without
you-
going through the routine, right? I mean, you can be married simply through physical relationships.
Well, again, it depends. That's right. The Mishnah writes there are 3 ways you can become kesef, bia, and shtar. Right. So the Gemara talks about that. They said not to do it through bia. You get mock. But strictly speaking, that is one. Ultimately, common law life. The fact you're living together with your wife in let's say in a observing community, that itself could make you married. There are other factors down the line. It wouldn't necessarily be the and here we're talking about kedusha. We're not talking about nisuin. Like one of the ways the Mishnah is talking about 3 ways of doing kedusha. The old practice was you did it kedusha, then 6 months to 12 months later you actually got married. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's a little different.
No, I'm just referring to the idea that it's an avera
Yeah.
to have pruruvu, but not really.
No, and that gets into another question. Maybe we'll get into tomorrow. Is let's say, can you fulfill pruruvu through an illicit relation? In other words, if the mitzvah is pruruvu, you could. In other words, let's say can you violate adultery? And have to get punished for adultery, but nevertheless still fulfill pruruvu. That's a separate question.
It seems to me a problem there.
It's clearly not a recommendation, right?
You're doing a mitzvah by means of an avera.
But we'll see. That's the famous minchas chinuch in the beginning of mitzvah. Maybe we'll get into that tomorrow. Because
shofar.
I still want the person to get married today, so I'm not going to discuss that until tomorrow. No. So that's a famous machlokes Rambam and the Rush, whether kedushin per se is a mitzvah. The nafkamina would be is whether you make the brachas before or after. There's an interesting shita of the Ravid. The Ravid seems to take a little of both. The Ravid seems to say like the Rambam. He agrees with the Rambam that it's a birkas ha-mitzvah. The Ravid writes it's a birkas ha-mitzvah, it's a mitzvah of kedushin. Yet, he says like the Rush, you make the bracha after the kedushin. So the kasha is, according to the Rambam, he's consistent. It's a birkas ha-mitzvah. You make the bracha first, then you do the mitzvah. According to the Rush, it's a birkas shavach l'da. You make it after. What's the pshan in the Ravid? It's a birkas ha-mitzvah, and it goes against the general principle of over la siyasan. Yeah, Jeff?
Offer her a ring and she may refuse.
Correct. So the Ravid's famous answer, and it's a general, we'll see, it's not just limited to kedushin, but this is a klal in Hilchas brachas. It's a local issue by brachas, not limited to kedushin. The concern is that she might reject the marriage. She might not want to marry you, and therefore you end up making the bracha, and therefore be a bracha of atal. So you don't take any chances. Do the kedushin, and then you make the bracha. So where else do we find this klal that when something's dependent on someone else, we don't like making a bracha? Right, so tzedakah is the same and different at the same time. That's the famous Chuvas Harashba. The famous question is, why no bracha on the mitzvah of tzedakah? Tzedakah is clearly a mitzvah min HaTorah. We make brachas on D'Rabbanan, even minhagim sometimes. So why is there no bracha on the mitzvah of tzedakah? So there's many answers, but the famous answer of the Rashba is, and how you understand the Rashba different ways, but he basically says, any mitzvah which is totally on someone else, any mitzvah which is dependent on someone else, that you can't make a bracha on. So the concern is that the ani comes to your door, you say, okay, wait a second, let me make a bracha, and then you give him the dower. He says, $1? Are you kidding? He throws it back at you and storms out of there. So it'll be a bracha levatala, and therefore we don't make a bracha. See, tzedakah is different. We don't make a bracha, period. By kedushin, we make a bracha afterwards according to according to the Ravid. Why the distinction between kedushin and tzedakah? Why by tzedakah we say, since you can't make the bracha, we're concerned it's a bracha levatala. So why not, by tzedakah, why not make the bracha after the ani accepts? Maybe, maybe that's what the Ravid sheet is, but I'm assuming it's not. Yeah?
Safek bracha, so
What's safek? I'm saying let the ani take the I'm saying, what do we, according to the Rabbi, what do you do? Do the Kiddushin. He doesn't say, hence no bracha. He says, therefore, we'll make the bracha after the Kiddushin. So why don't we say, so either way, pick any choice. Why aren't we consistent by Kiddushin and Tzedakah? Either choose not to make a bracha, period, or make the, which is a general question. So Machlokes, the Rambam and the Or Zarua, in general, by a Birkas HaMitzvah, can you make a bracha after the mitzvah? That itself is a fundamental question. The Rambam's opinion is, you only can make a bracha before the mitzvah. The Or Zarua's opinion in Hilchas Shchita, that's what the Machlokes is, by the laws of slaughtering an animal, can I make, if I did the Shchita already, can I make a bracha afterwards? The Rambam says no. The Or Zarua says yes. Well, so therefore, the Machlokes, the Rambam or Zarua is, what is the nature of a Birkas HaMitzvah? The Rambam clearly seems to say it's a hechsher for the mitzvah, in order to help to do the mitzvah properly. According to the Or Zarua, it's to enhance the mitzvah. So ideally, you can enhance it by doing it before, but if to make the bracha afterwards also okay. So we generally assume, like the Rambam, that we don't make brachas after, with certain exceptions to the rule. So the Ravid is saying here, so we make the, so why is the Ravid saying by Kiddushin you make the bracha afterwards, but not by tzedakah? So that's because for another reason. That's not the only reason why we don't make a bracha on tzedakah. If it was, it would probably be a good kasha. Maybe we would. There are other reasons why you don't make a bracha. One of the famous reasons is we have a similar Beis Yosef by Bittul Chametz. The Beis Yosef asked, we know we do Bittul Chametz and we do Bedika. We do the Bittul, we nullify it in the heart. We read the Kol Chamir, we actually verbalize it also. And we do the Bedika, we search and burn. Searching and burning is only rabbinical. Nullifying it in your heart is biblical. So the Beis Yosef asks, why don't we make a bracha on the rabbinical mitzvah? It would make more sense to make it on the biblical mitzvah Bittul. Make the bracha on Bittul Chametz, not on Bedika. So the Beis Yosef answers, because the Gemara says, Bittul B'leiv Sagi. Since strictly speaking, it's enough minat Torah. If you just did the Bittul, if you nullified in your heart that the chametz no longer belongs to you, on the Torah level, that's enough. Nothing belongs to you anymore. So therefore, anytime you can fulfill a mitzvah b'leiv in your heart without a maisa, Chazal never instituted a bracha, because it's very hard to determine when you're doing something in your heart what your kavanah is, what you're doing. So the rule of thumb is you need a maisa. So since, even though by tzedakah ultimately there will be a maisa, but if we assume that you fulfill the mitzvah when you make the commitment in your heart to give, so therefore there are other reasons why we don't make a bracha. So by Kiddushin, once the mitzvah is done, if you hold like the Or Zarua Shita, that you can make a bracha after the mitzvah, so there could be the Rav could argue on two counts, or the Rambam and the Rav. The Rav could argue that when he agrees that the Kiddushin is a mitzvah, but he could be cholek on the Rambam and say he holds that you can't make a Birkas HaMitzvah after, or you could say fundamentally he agrees, but Kiddushin, or do you say he holds like the Rush or he holds like the Rambam? So different possibilities on why he says you can make a bracha afterwards. And why either he agrees, he says in general you can, or he wants to make a distinction between tzedakah and Kiddushin, because tzedakah is ikara b'leiv, but by Kiddushin there's a Maisa Kiddushin.
Definitely a Maisa.